just to say a few words about myself. I've worked for SYLO Beyond HR for 6 years, supporting quite a range of SME businesses, and with generic sort of HR support, so employee relations, policy development. We also look after recruitment and do audits for organisations. We offer a range of services, including learning and development, so we have a big sort of training function. We also have consultants who work with businesses on their business strategy, and so that's a little bit about SYLO Beyond HR. I'm just going to hand over to Sophie for a moment to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Heather. Hi guys, I'm Sophie. As Heather mentioned, I do new business development for SP1 IT Solutions. We are a strategic and specialist IT company who deal mostly in the legal and professional sector, so anything to do with law firms, accountancy firms, startups or architects. That's mainly our niche, but we have a lot of experience in the area of hybrid working at the moment, flexible working, what these all mean as a whole, and can give you advice based on that on this webinar. So I will touch a bit more on the technology side later, so I'm just going to hand back to Heather.
Thanks, Sophie. If you want to just move to the next slide, if you don't mind, Sophie, that's great. So in terms of what we're talking about today, we're going to look at some recent trends, some sort of stats that are coming out, particularly with the new sort of environment that people are hoping to sort of maybe go back to in their working environments. We're going to look at engagement activities that you can consider doing with your employees, or reviewing what engagement activities you have at the moment. And Sophie's going to be looking at tips to improve communication and collaboration, and some technology solutions and tools to improve productivity and retention, which is obviously what we're all here and hoping to learn about today. Okay, if you want to move on, that's great. So a recent global survey, we looked at this recent global survey, which actually comes up for the UK with these 5 top reasons why people may want to leave an organisation. So they are in order of importance. So for instance, relationships with colleagues came up as the top one. Good work-life balance, which no one will be surprised about, and good relationships with managers, which, to be honest, in the past I'd say that's probably been the number one, but it's still up there in the top 5. And appreciation for your work, so that sort of reward, that sort of recognition potentially, and praise of staff, and interesting job content. So we'll just talk a little bit more about those now. So if you look at the top 4, and potentially even the 5th reason why people might want to leave an organisation, they could all have been affected by the dynamics of home working. So most rely on good communication and being valued by colleagues and managers, as well as the intrinsic value of the job role, because obviously that is always quite a key aspect as to why people might consider leaving an organisation. But it is interesting that that's the 5th reason. And so relationships are probably something that people are really missing, because they're actually feeling that in the potential remote working environment that a lot of people are having to work in at the moment, but actually it's still quite difficult to sort of build those relationships. So that's something that we really need to sort of give some thought to. Reward is not a big theme, so just looking for a pay rise hasn't featured at all in those top 5. But appreciation of people's work through their recognition and their manager praising maybe an individual or a team if they've won a new client or something like that, is very much what employees are looking for. And it also, recognition builds trust, and trust is more difficult to achieve in a remote working setting. And that's you're not having these water cooler conversations. This is one thing that's really come out of the way that we've been working in the recent past, that employees really want to have that, build that trust. And it's I mean, particularly if you're taking on new staff, it's something that we've really got to put a lot of thought into, because it's quite it's one thing that's quite hard to achieve in that remote working environment. But there are ways to do it, which we'll cover a little bit more today. But that's something that we really need to value and realise it's very important to employees. and flexible working, hybrid working, and remote working, they all need to be considered carefully and given the potential of employee expectations. Obviously, there's a lot in the press about what other employers are doing to allow people to sort of work from home. But they're the headlines. I mean, really, you have to get down to the details sometimes to work out what could really work for your organisation. And looking at employee wellbeing, that's a significant part of home working, which good relationships, will help, foster employee wellbeing in the workplace through obviously the COVID safe environment and even maybe some home comforts. I mean, I went into an office recently, and it was just so stark with all the COVID regulation screens, and I think people who have been used to working from home, we've almost got to sort of entice them back into the office a little bit. And I've even seen people saying things like having real plants that people can sort of nurture, and just having something that just doesn't feel too sort of stark and sterile will maybe make people feel more willing and comfortable, sort of coming back into that workplace. Okay, Sophie, if you could just move on for me, that would be great. And what we've done here, we've just got some other sort of stats together. And this is from a recent survey from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. And this is around the flexible working arrangements that people have been sort of experiencing in the workplace in the last 12 months. And I want people to think about flexible working as well as not just sort of maybe hybrid working, because there will be employees who hybrid or remote working isn't an option for, and therefore flexible working is something that you can do. It doesn't have to be that model. There are other ways that you can create flexible working. So I just wanted to just run through a couple of things here for you. So around 50% of people in the last 12 months have been able to select their start and finish times. I think that's quite a high number, actually. And so if you're not doing any flexible working and start and finish time wise, and you could do, it is something that you should look at, because I think that's quite a high stat, because some employers, obviously, if you're working shifts or something, there's no option to do flexible working around start and finish time. So if you actually take those people out of the equation, you've got 50%. That's quite a high number of people that are having that as an option. And job shares are interesting. It's something that not a lot of organisations do, but it is a real opportunity to retain staff. So you may have someone coming back from maternity leave who wants to work part-time, and you actually think, well, we really need a full FTE for that. Considering people for a job share, or even advertising a job share, you can sometimes attract and retain really highly skilled people if you're prepared to consider job sharing a role. And it is surprising how many roles you can actually job share. So I would definitely encourage employers to consider that going forward, because you can retain some really highly skilled people, or even just attract them to the business. Another one is compressed working hours. So I've got an interesting example here of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they are allowing their employees now in the summer months to work compressed hours, so that they do their 37 hours, their weekly hours, in a 4.5-day week, and then they can have Friday afternoon off. They also give people flexible start and finish times, and they're also allowing people to work from home part of the week as well. So, they're actually doing a complete blend of things. And I think you need to just look at your organisations and say, okay, from a flexible working perspective, what could work for us? And obviously, to speak to your employees and see what they would really like going forward. And then you have to work from a business perspective and say, well, what can we actually achieve, and what roles could we achieve that for? Because that will help retain people, because there will be a real appetite to understand what businesses will be doing when people are going back into the office. Okay. And I think there was one other point I was going to make on this, which was only 10% of people take up the opportunity to reduce their working hours from full-time to part-time. I thought that was quite an interesting statistic, and I thought it was probably something that maybe some people might increase sort of going forward. But again, it's something that organisations should be open to, and obviously most employers can put a flexible working requesting to request that. But if you can think creatively about trying to allow these people who are requesting this, authorising those and finding ways, creative ways around supporting that, then that will help you retain staff going forward. Okay, thanks, Sophie. You just move on to global trends. So this was quite interesting, but looking at what trends have come through in the recent months. So more than half of respondents in this survey said they wouldn't wish to work for an employer whose social and environmental policies don't match their own. Now, what we're finding is more people who are maybe Generation Y or millennials, they seem to have, this is sort of more of an issue for them in terms of, whether they would stay with an employer. And then for Generation X employees, so basically some of the older employers that may be born between maybe 1965 and 1980, it's less of an issue for them. It's probably 10% less in terms of their how they value that in terms of the the employee sort of experience and within their organisation. And also obviously the recent Black Lives Matter movement and Me Too movements and major environmental events with regard to climate change, they've also impacted employee values. And so employers need to be a little bit more proactive around diversity and inclusion, and also involving employees in those conversations, and consider maybe offering unconscious bias training to to managers, and more broadly, if you can do across your workforce, to just help people understand how they need to operate in today's sort of working environment. And again, I know we focused a little bit on flexible working here and hybrid working, but 64% of workers would like flexible working and to work from home. And the figures in the UK are broadly the same as the global figures in terms of that. So obviously, as we've talked about, you'll need to consider what works for your organisation. There probably will be some red lines, because true hybrid working is the ability to work anywhere, which isn't necessarily very practical for some organisations. But it's something that you need to think about what's going to work for us, what's going to help us retain staff, and maybe look at your employer branding and think, does this need a refresh? Should we have a focus group to maybe look at our employee branding? Because that is something that can help also attract staff as well as retain the ones that you've got. So if we could just move on, Sophie, to the engagement activities, that would be great. Thank you. So this slide really, it's another survey really looking at what employees are experiencing in the workplace at the moment in terms of engagement activities that their employers are sort of offering. So if you look at the sort of the higher figures, are say 57% of people are still getting their one-to-ones with their line manager, whether that's on Zoom or I suppose for some people it will still be in person. 50% of people are still having team meetings, but 42% of employees are participating in employee surveys. So that's quite a high number. So if you're not doing any form of employee survey, or maybe sometimes can be referred to as pulse surveys, which are sort of short, maybe 4 or 5 question surveys to just really take the pulse of the employees' voice at that moment in sort of time, and to understand people's views and values. This helps you prioritise and enables you to invest in the key areas that will aid retention and develop an open culture where listening to your employees' views and taking relevant actions, that should be the norm. And I'm obviously giving you statistics which are very general for the UK. Obviously, they may be a little bit different in your industry, and so we really recommend really finding out from your own workforce what's important to them, in case they may buck the trend, they may have some different views. And so if you take those on board, employees really appreciate that. But you do need to have some follow-up on the things that they raise as issues for them, because otherwise, that's how you build trust with them, and people are prepared to openly share their views, sort of moving forward in the future as well, when they've seen that you've actually sort of taken some action. And just in terms of investment, it just helps you prioritise what's really important to people. And obviously, you're going to have limited funds to do that, and so it's important to make sure you're investing them in the right places. So we would always recommend a blend of engagement activities. So maybe focus groups could be useful for exploring specific topics, maybe diversity and inclusion initiatives, or feedback on a new IT system. That could be like cross-function focus group. You've got a lot of people using online forums now. That might be good for improving collaboration between staff. And so people can sort of bounce ideas around and get sort of instant, quick responses. And then the other things on here, so that had at the moment about 14% uptake up in terms of chat rooms and online forums. So that's something that could be really useful. And if you're not looking into those, you can look into some of the technologies available and the things like Yammer and various other sort of chat rooms or options out there. And I think we've got about 19% of people using trade unions to, in terms of communication and engagement. And then 5% have consultation committees, which tend to be slightly larger organisations where you might have an employee from each department working with management on anything that relates to employee relations, etc., and ongoing sort of initiatives. So they're on the sort of smaller side. Okay, if you could just move on to my last slide, that'd be great. And I just wanted to, I don't know if people realise the cost of employee turnover. Obviously, people appreciate the time that goes into having to replace a staff member, and sometimes the concern of the loss of skills when people leave, particularly if they're really valued employees. But currently, it's around £11,000 an average for an average waged person when they leave an organisation. Obviously, that would be significantly higher if you're trying to recruit specialist roles that are hard to recruit, or senior roles. And so, that really justifies putting some time and effort into your retention strategies, because if as the data seems to suggest that a lot of people will be looking to move on and looking for new opportunities, it's really important now to start engaging with people. I'm sure you have already, but really look at what you're doing and build on what you've got already to try and improve your retention, and just keep an engaged workforce who are happy in what they do. What I'd like to do now is pass on to Sophie to talk about all the ways that her business can help you with your retention.
Thank you ever so much, Heather. Thank you. That was really interesting. It's scary figures out there, actually, and you don't realise how crazy things can change, especially post-pandemic. I think we're still kind of in it. Thank you guys for all joining today. I'm Sophie, as mentioned again. I do the business development for SP1 IT Solutions. So we specialise in legal and professional IT, specifically strategies, any end-to-end support. Project management is a huge thing we're doing at the moment. A lot of people are managing projects differently and wanting to bring people, processes and technology together. And that's what we're all about, essentially. My part of the webinar is going to be talking about bringing people, processes and technology together. So technology, engagement and communication, and in turn, all of these things should increase your employee retention. Because ultimately, when you have happy, productive employees, why would you want to leave? So let's have a look at some scary figures. So 44% of employees worldwide don't feel like their workspace is smart enough. So if you reflect that to yourself and think about exactly what you're giving your employees tools wise to try and make sure that they can do their job as efficiently as possible and easily as possible, then this is the kind of thing, when you're productive and you feel good about yourself, you feel good about your job, and you feel like you're actually achieving something, then that's fantastic. But if you have really long, laborious ways to do things, that's really manual heavy, laborious, then actually it slows down productivity, it slows down the mentality that you're achieving things, and it actually puts more pressure on the employee as they need to do things within a certain pressured timescale. But there are other ways to speed up this productivity. 43% of employees are secretly using their own personal devices for work without the company knowing. So this is actually quite a scary thing, mostly because there's lots of employees' terms and conditions, anything to do with cybersecurity, that kind of thing, that protects the company's technology or their data, everything in-house. Now, if your employees are actually using their own devices to become more productive, so whether it be laptops, mobile phones, or tablets, or any other kind of device, you need to be asking yourself, why are they using those tools to help do their job better? Why aren't we providing them with them? Is it unknown? Is it secretly known? All these things are really scary terms, especially for cybersecurity aspect. 48% of employees say old and slow technology, where they have wasted 3 or more hours due to insufficient systems, impairs their productivity. Now, if you calculate per employee that you have, the hour you pay them hourly, times it by 3, times it by how many days a week they work and how many weeks a year they work, that amount of time is wasted because they're using slow old technologies that actually aren't helping them do their job any quicker, will only really increase the frustration that they are going through. Could you imagine yourself maybe just being given something that is really old, really slow, and being told, here you go, you need to do this the same way you did in your last job in the same time period at the same speed? Actually, you're going to be sat there thinking to yourself, I can't do this. This isn't something I'm going to be able to do. It's too slow. I can't get this done in time. So these are all aspects you need to consider with old softwares. With that being said, how does this contribute and impact on employee retention? So as we can see from our very happy employee here, to the left picture, he's got his technology, his notepad, he's got everything he wants and needs, and a plant, Heather, might I add, from your, from your plant comment. He's happy, he's doing what he needs. He's got the support from his employers, he's got the technology he needs, and the employers are really hearing him. If you listen to your employers, ask them, what do you need from me? Do you have the right technology in place? What can we do as an employer to improve and help you become more productive? Actually opening up that communication not only engages you and your employee and employer connection, but actually you might hear new things that might be better for your company. You might hear more positive results, and actually being heard as an employee is really important to building up the management employer relationship. And as Heather mentioned previously in one of her slides, that was one of the top 5 things that people wanted to be able to stay in a job. Being heard, being engaged, and having that open communication is really important, especially when it comes to technology, because that opens up all 3 things. Now, Heather mentioned before, we were talking about collaborative tools to open up communications within a business. I mean, we have a very agnostic approach. So we as a business are not tied to anybody. It's not about that for us. We are about finding the right solutions for you as a company, not what one size fits all or this is someone we partner with. So some of the tools we use, Teams, we use Teams internally ourselves. We recommend it. We think it's fantastic. Taco, that's also a good one. Slack, all of these different platforms all very much do the same things, but have little niches within the softwares that actually might be a bit more beneficial to your system and your processes, but they all ultimately open the communication internally and equally externally. You could, whether you're remote working or hybrid working or office working, having the option to speak to each other within a platform is really important, because we can't now go up and just join somebody anymore. We've got social distancing, we've got screen glasses in place. We need an open communication tool to keep people engaged. So, legacy systems. So what we mean by legacy systems is old, slow, clunky software. There's many reasons, as we can see here, which we'll go through, why you may not want to change from that software. So the biggest one I can see there, which I'm pretty sure you'll all agree, whether it can be your decision yourself or you have a decision maker in place, is cost. Over the pandemic, I specifically have experienced a lot of people get to the point where they want to spend money, think, right, it's a great time to invest in a new system. Then we go back into lockdown. There's another cash freeze because everybody goes into panic mode. So they don't want to spend money. And actually, then they spend the next 3 months using the old clunky, slow software. And actually, that costs more money in the long run. Lack of knowledge of systems in the market. Another one, if you don't know what is out there, then a lot of people get nervous about investing in something that actually they're scared of thinking, oh, what if this doesn't work? What if this isn't good to use? Limited availability of projects in niche markets. So if you have a company or a business where it's very niche and you need certain things for it to do, there might not be that perfect system out there for you, which is a reason you may be hanging on to your old software. Employee resistance to change. Now, this is quite a big one. A lot of people and employees get so used to using something a certain way that they can't see that there might be a better way that could actually improve their job, make it easier, make them more productive, make it quicker, and in turn make them feel good about what they're doing. So having people and your employees educated on what is out there and what they can use is ultimately a benefit. Lack of internal resources. So if you don't have a big enough team internally to manage the projects, that's something where maybe getting somebody like us or anybody else for external help to manage the project, make sure it's in there, it flows properly. Time to train the employees, that's another one. It costs time. Ultimately, time is money to retrain any employee into any new system. Lastly, risk of losing other software. So because other softwares may link with your legacy system, there might be a bit of a worry that you might lose some of the information, the data, that kind of thing. But with the right partner and right help, that wouldn't be a worry. Okay, so employee engagement. So what we mean by this is your user experience is very important to keeping your employee engaged. So if you were using a software which isn't very interactive, it's not very easy to use, it's only going to cause frustration, this is something that's going to really frustrate your employee. It may be cost effective, or you may not know what else is out there, or what we're finding at the moment from people out there is because they're not knowing how to use the software, they're just using it as an excuse of not being able to do their job. And ultimately that impacts on everyone. It impacts on the employee's mental health because they're feeling frustrated. It impacts on you as an employer because you are paying somebody to do this job, but they can't actually do it and the software is not working for them to do it. So making sure you're having the right technology in place for the engagement and communication, keeping that all open is super important. Ultimately, if you get this all right and bring your processes and technology together with employees, your productivity is going to go up, your employee retention is going to go up, your employee happiness, the feeling of them being heard, progress, everything will progress and start to succeed. And your user experience, your user experience is the guide to making their working life easier and in turn more satisfied and comfortable. And that's what we want ultimately. So how can we bring people to processes and technology together? So whether you are remote working, whether you are in the office full time now, or whether you're doing a bit of both, ultimately we need to boost the culture, whichever route you're down. The pandemic forced us to go just a certain route. So most companies out there just threw together a model. This will have to do just so people could work from home and they could get their job done. Whether it be easy or not, we were all frustrated. We all had to just deal with what we had to do at the time. But is that model future-proof? Are you sticking to that reactive model, or are you putting plans now in the future to make things better, to bring people, process, and technology together to reflect hybrid, flexible, remote, or office working? All these things are new considerations you need to have, new roadmaps, new IT strategies. You need to open communication. You need to automate things. Ultimately, these things will increase productivity and progression. So It was really nice to see this quote, because ultimately it reflects the message we're trying to give you today. So the use of technology is becoming increasingly prevalent in many organisations, overseeing of staff competency, management and training. It makes sense to automate swathes of these processes to free up administrative time to focus on maximising the output of your workforce. Deploying technology to underpin these processes always opens up them to your workforce, making them more interactive with their work and more aware of training requirements and possibilities. So you can see the parts I've highlighted in why I found really hit home with the message we were trying to give you today. Technology is becoming increasingly prevalent in many organisations. Are you one of those organisations? Are you considering your technology roadmap moving forwards? The process is to free up administrative time and focusing on maximising the output of your workforce. Are you doing everything you can, looking at your IT strategies and technologies to help maximise your employees' output? You want to make them happy, you want to make them productive and progressive, and this is the way to do it. And ultimately making them more interactive with their work. To conclude, the benefit of bringing people and people and technology together will increase engagement and communication. This way, employees remain productive in their roles and in turn happy. You want them happy, you want them to stay, you want them to feel productive. Thank you ever so much, guys, for listening. We really appreciate you coming to the webinar. What we are offering ourselves is, if you ever had wanted a conversation with us, we're giving you a free half an hour free of charge initial conversation, just to see if there's any scope for work, if you needed anything from us, if you wanted to see what kind of work we do, any case studies, more than happy to offer that to you guys. So please do reach out if you want anything like that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.